Okay. Dr. Helen Smith is a psychologist specializing in forensic issues in Knoxville, Tennessee. She is the author, more importantly to me, of Men on Strike: Why Men Are Boycotting Marriage, Fatherhood, and the American Dream, and Why It Matters. She is my colleague at PJ Media. You can find her at pjmedia.com/Dr. Helen, all together, Dr. Helen. Hi, Helen. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Andrew. How are you?
It's great to see you. It's been a while since we've talked. I think the last time it was out at the beach somewhere.
Yeah, well, it was out in California. I think we did a show on porn back then. Now, we didn't do porn. I mean, we just did a show on porn, but it's been a while.
I always get to talk to you about the best thing, you know. So,
yes, right.
So I want to talk about Men on Strike, but I want to talk first about a study that I saw and the way it was reported too. I think this was in the Washington Post. It said a new study shows that teenagers, and this is the way they put it, are increasingly delaying activities that had long been seen as rites of passage into adulthood. The study in journal Child Development found that the percentage of adolescents in the United States who have a driver's license, who have tried alcohol, who date, and who work for pay has plummeted since 1976. But basically it says that they're not having as much sex and they're not drinking as much. So the headline could have been teenagers are getting more wholesome. It could have been a good news story, but so which is it? I mean, do you think that teenagers or males, teenagers especially, are absconding on adulthood, or are they just getting wise?
I mean, I think it's both girls and boys, but I think that there are several reasons for that. I think that we are delaying childhood so much more. I think parents now, they have fewer children. We have 1 to 3 children, on average 2.3. So I think parents put more and more effort into kids. And I think because of that I think kids are very much overprotected now. We have a lot of helicopter parents, and I'm not blaming parents. I don't think it's their fault. I think part of it is that we have so much supervision at schools and places for kids. Kids don't get outside and play anymore. I just don't think they're exposed to a lot of things that we were exposed to, and we understood more about the world. They did these studies. I mean, I remember these studies have been going on for like 10, 15, 20 years, where they've been saying that kids are getting younger and younger. You see kids who are 18, they're saying they're more like 15-year-olds. I think there are two different things going on. I think one thing is that kids should be doing things like driving or getting jobs and things like that, and they're not. And I think that's a concern. The sexual concern of the alcohol, those are not really concerns. They're more, I mean, what's going on. So I think it depends. I mean, should kids 15 to 18 have sex? It depends. I mean, what is your feeling about that? Is that a good thing or bad thing? It depends on the person.
I grew up in the 60s. It was such a hypersexualized time that it took me a long time to say to myself, you know what? I'm not really enjoying this. I actually want to be with somebody and like the people that I'm with instead of just doing stuff, and I think that was a very healthy thing, but it was such an unhealthy time. It was such a revolutionary time that it was hard for me to catch up with it, I think. I think the thing is, old people always think young people are just going wild. They always think young people are having sex. But you're kind of saying that men are withdrawing a little bit from the sexual game. Do you think that's still true?
I don't know that men are withdrawing so much, but I think that there are so many other avenues for men. And I think part of the problem is that we're always seeing things like there was one book and one that you mentioned about, is cheap sex causing men not to get married? And I had written a post about that. And a lot of my readers really educate me and help me to understand what's going on. And a lot of them, to me, say, you know what? It's not that marriage is cheap. I think that the reality is that we treat men very cheaply in our society. We treat men in ways that make them not want to be married. We treat them as disposable objects who are there for the availability of women now. And I think men used to, in the old days, get something out of marriage. There was a kind of a bargain. Hey, you're going to do some things for me and I'm going to do them for you. But now it's like, the society tells women, you should have it all. You're the one that gets to go to work. But if you want to, you could stay home and have kids. But a man doesn't really have a choice. And I think young men today really see their fathers, their uncles, older brothers, and they see that the contract for them isn't working out as well, that the marriage contract for them, anytime there's a problem, it's always the man's fault. And I think in older times, we didn't blame men. And I think our society as a whole is blaming men for every evil and every problem that we have in society. So I think that does get men withdrawing a little bit more and finding porn, the internet, and other avenues a little bit better. It's not that it's cheaper. It's just that their lives are cheapened by the fact that we don't actively give men those things in marriage that they would need in order to think it's a good deal.
You,
Does that make sense?
yes, I mean it makes sense. But the guy who writes the book "Cheap Sex" is actually saying that now sex is a buyer's market. I mean the cliche is that what men want. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, the cliche is that what men want out of life is sex, sex, sex. That they want lots of partners. They want easy sex. They want to get it, get it wherever they can, and all this stuff. Do men want to? Do men want to be in a marriage? I mean, do they want a bond like that?
I think men really do want that bond,
Yeah.
but they've looked at the Pew Research study, did a study, and they found out that it used to be that almost 40% of men thought marriage was the most important thing in their life,
Hmm.
and now it's down to 29%.
Wow.
Women, it's going up. And the reason it's dropping, I think, is just that it's marriage. I think men still want relationships, and men tell me that. Men still very much believe that that's an important thing for them. But I think it's very hard to find in our society. First of all, to find a woman, I know that you and other people have found really good partners, but there are many men out there who the women today are told, it's not a good thing to be a wife and a mother. They're told to delay those things, and they're also told that men are supposed to provide them with everything. They're supposed to provide the money. They're supposed to provide just helping with the children. And I think for men, the expectations are so high that it's very difficult to make that leap into getting married. Also, if things go wrong, remember the man is going to be the one that's going to get the full brunt of it. A woman legally, I'm not saying
Yeah.
on a personal level,
Yeah.
but I think that makes it very hard for men to want to take that jump to get married because they know that they're going to be held more responsible, more so than a woman would be.
One of the reasons I always want to find out about this is because every story I read is about the proliferation of cheap sex, and college kids are having these weekends where this is all they do. Every single person I know is lonely and
Yeah.
not getting out, and miserable. Basically,
Right.
I mean that they yearn for companionship.
They do, and I think because our society is so externally oriented now, we have everything. We've gone to all this technology where everybody, and I'm not saying it's the phones, but everybody looks at technology. They look at the internet, and I think that over the years, our communities, everybody moves around, and we don't know each other as well. So nobody really knows, and because there's so much mistrust between people, and I think even our political system make it so we all mistrust each other. Democrats mistrust Republicans, Republicans we're all like so angry with each other, and I think that it makes it very difficult, not just politically, but so many people I think get hurt or feel that you can't trust somebody, and I think our society. Even in the job situation, there's, all of us are replaceable now. And I think we don't put a value on human life. And when you don't put a value on people as individuals, I think what you get is a society full of people who don't value other people's individuality. And I've seen that more and more just in my own practice. I've seen so many, you're right. I mean, so many kids and teens and adults are lonely now.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you see all this stuff on Facebook, and there's a discrepancy between everything that you see in the movies and the media about how everybody's having a great time. They're all partying, they're all having sex. And at the same time, you're home and lonely. And you can kind of see the discrepancy where everybody's depressed.
Yeah. I know
You know?
it looks that way to me too. That's why when I read these stories, I kind of think like, gee, this is not my experience.
No.
You have a practice. You see people. If a man came to you and said, I want to be married. I know that psychologists aren't in the business of giving advice, but just in imagination, if a man came to you and said, I would like to find a wife, what would your advice be to him?
In the old days, my advice was I hope that you can find somebody really great and let's help you to do that. But over the years, I've been in practice so long that my advice has changed over the years. And a lot of times, if it depends what age the man is, if the man really, really wants children, I would try to teach that person or help that man to find a partner that is really suitable for him. But I tend towards more seeing middle-aged men and older who have already been married. And a lot of those men, a lot of them tell me, I never want to get married again.
Wow.
And the reason is that because they were hurt so badly the first time, a wife has taken their children. I also want to say that in our society, kids are kind of used as pawns. In other words, in our society, more and more, those children used to, in the old days, they belonged more to the men, to the husband, to the father. They had more say in where the kids went. Nowadays, if you look at almost in every case, the woman 80% of the time gets those children. Men, it's very, very difficult for men to actually get access to their kids if there's a divorce. And I think that children are used as a pawn. And because of that, I think that when men are middle-aged and they already have children, maybe there's not as much of a point of getting married at that point. So I might give the advice to the man, maybe you want to wait and see. Is that something you really want to do? I mean, I don't know. I hear what you're saying, and it's very difficult. It's a legal contract, and a legal contract
Yeah.
that says to men now, you're responsible, and if things go wrong, the courts are not going to favor you. The courts are against you in the majority of cases.
So you wrote a book called Men on Strike: Why Men Are Boycotting Marriage, Fatherhood, and the American Dream, and Why It Matters. Why does it matter? Why is what's going on important?
Because what we're seeing is so many men and boys withdrawing today. We see boys in school that are all on, they're all diagnosed with
I know.
ADHD because boys can't, we could go on and on, but we know that boys are having a lot of emotional problems. They're not learning in schools. They're not going to college as often. They're not doing jobs anymore. And they're withdrawing from society. And I think that affects, number one, I mean, first of all, it affects themselves as individuals. It affects our society, and it affects economically. It affects every aspect of our lives. A lot of women are unhappy, but that's not the important thing. I wrote Men on Strike because it's important that men be treated as autonomous beings who deserve respect and an education and due process in this country. And that brings me to another point, which is that I really like what the Trump administration is doing with Betsy DeVos,
Yeah.
with going after Title IX and looking at some of these due process rights for young men on college campuses. Young men's rights under the Obama administration were taken away in that they reduced the level of preponderance of evidence that one needs to accuse a young man of rape or sexual assault on campus. And what DeVos is trying to do is say, hey, let's put that preponderance back up. Instead of 50% of the time you're guilty, let's have it go back to more a criminal case where it would be you need beyond a shadow of a doubt. Or, it seems so unfair if you're a young man in college today. Just imagine, I know you have a son. I know other people have sons out there. And I think a lot of men and young men and their fathers are afraid. What do you do if your son is accused
Yeah.
of sexual abuse? I mean, there are many issues that young men are facing today that they didn't face years ago. And it's a really very much a tragedy that in the United States of America that young men's due process rights are so easily, flippantly tossed out.
It's a strange paradox that feminists have essentially said that they want to be treated exactly like men, but they want men to still behave as if they were young ladies from the Victorian era. And you can't have both things. There's a price you pay for everything.
Well, what they want is they want men to have responsibility and women to have privilege. That's the new feminist mentality. And
Yeah.
the old feminist mentality was more, you always think of it as more equality. That's
Right.
what I thought when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s. It was sort of like, oh, you thought it was going to be like an equality type thing. And now it's just, well, women are privileged and men need to be responsible. They don't say that.
Right.
But that's what we see in the legal and the political realm.
Yeah. Dr. Helen Smith, the author of Men on Strike: Why Men Are Boycotting Marriage, Fatherhood, and the American Dream, and Why It Matters. You can find her online at pjmedia.com/Dr. Helen, all one word. Helen, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you.
Hope you
Thank
come back to
you.
LA. I'll see you. Say hi to Glenn.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.